Psoriasis. We think we know what it is, right? A chronic, inflammatory skin disease. You get those red, scaly patches, the itchiness, the discomfort. But what if that's only scratching the surface? What if our whole understanding of this condition is about to get a major upgrade? Now, this isn't just some hypothetical question to get you thinking. This is the big idea that's driving a huge shift in dermatology right now. It's a challenge to look past what we see on the skin and peer deep inside, into the very machinery of our cells.
And that brings us to a pretty radical new concept, seeing psoriasis not as a skin problem, but as a metabolic one. Now hold on, we're not talking about metabolism in the sense of diet and exercise. We're talking about the metabolism happening inside each individual skin cell.
And hey, this isn't some fringe idea. This is coming from leading researchers in the field. What Dr. Gonzalez-Cantero is saying here is absolutely crucial. The problem starts with how the immune cells in the skin are making and using energy. It's that energy crisis at a cellular level that's really driving the inflammation you see on the surface.
Okay, so if the root cause is metabolic, how well does our standard treatment really work? Well, for most people, the first thing a doctor prescribes is a topical steroid cream. And yeah, they can work, but they come with some really serious downsides.
So here's the trade-off. On the one hand, sure, steroids are fast. They can give you relief pretty quickly, sometimes in just a few weeks. But you can't use them for long. You're limited to about 4 weeks at a time because of side effects, like the skin getting thinner. And here's the real kicker. We now know corticosteroids can actually make the body's overall metabolic problems worse.
And this just perfectly illustrates the problem. When we only use steroids to suppress the inflammation, we're engaging in what's being called metabolic neglect. It's like we're just putting a bandage on the symptoms, while that fundamental metabolic fire inside the cells just keeps on burning. We aren't actually fixing anything.
To really understand the real problem, we need to dive into something called the immunometabolic loop. This is the vicious cycle that gets set up inside psoriatic skin cells.
Here's the key takeaway. In psoriasis, the cell's metabolism, how it makes energy, and the immune response get tangled up. They start feeding each other. The messed up energy production triggers the immune system, and then the immune system tells the cell to keep making energy in that messed up way. It becomes this closed loop that is incredibly hard to break.
So let's zoom in here. Healthy cells are really efficient at making energy, but psoriatic cells, they switch to this frantic, super inefficient process even when there's plenty of oxygen around. Think of it like a car engine just guzzling fuel and spewing out tons of toxic exhaust. And the result of that is a huge buildup of a byproduct called lactate. Now, for a long time, we just thought lactate was junk, just waste. But it turns out it's a really powerful signaling molecule. Look here in this diagram. That lactate buildup isn't just sitting there. It actively goes in and hijacks the cell's control center, its nucleus, and changes which genes get turned on. It basically locks the cell into a permanent all systems go for inflammation and growth. This is the key that keeps that vicious cycle spinning.
So, if the problem is a broken metabolic engine inside the cell, how in the world do you fix it? Well, a new approach is trying to do exactly that, using a tool you probably wouldn't expect: light.
It's a therapy called photobiomodulation, or PBM for short, and it's totally non-invasive. It uses a very specific wavelength of near-infrared light that can pass through the skin and reach the tiny power plants inside our cells, the mitochondria.
The best way to think about this light is like a mitochondrial reset button. When those light photons hit the mitochondria, they basically help reboot the normal, efficient energy-making process, and that breaks the cycle. It cuts down on that toxic lactate buildup, which in turn stops those pro-inflammatory genetic signals. You're not just quieting the inflammation, you're fixing the engine that was causing it in the first place.
Okay, so that's the theory. Sounds pretty cool, right? But does it actually work? Well, the clinical results are kind of amazing, showing the potential for long-lasting remission, all without any drugs. Just take a look. On the left, you've got the active psoriatic plaques before the therapy, and on the right, after a course of PBM, the clearance is just dramatic. And what's so important here is that this was done with 0 corticosteroids, none at all.
And that wasn't a fluke. Here's the same thing on the patient's back. Again, you can see all that inflammation on the left and then beautiful clear skin on the right. This is what it looks like when you target the root cause, not just the symptoms.
But this might be the most powerful piece of evidence right here. The treated areas stayed clear for over a year. This isn't just temporary relief that comes right back when you stop the treatment. This suggests a true, lasting change in the biology of the skin itself. It's what scientists call disease modification.
So what does all of this mean for the big picture? I mean, this is about more than just a new therapy for one disease. This is like getting a sneak peek into the future of medicine.
As Dr. Rox Anderson from Harvard says, we are living through a massive biological revolution. We're moving beyond just finding chemicals that block things in the body. We're entering an era where we can actually design and manipulate living systems, like, say, rebooting a cell's metabolism with light to restore health from the inside out.
You know, for so many chronic diseases, our best medicines have just been about managing symptoms, right? Just keeping things under control. But as we learn to reprogram the very biology of our cells, you have to ask, are we finally entering an era where we can truly fix the fundamental problem? This new way of looking at psoriasis suggests the answer just might be yes.